Hello, I'm Brian Wilford, Member of Parliament for Richmond Hill, and this is Pasargad. I want to first of all talk about constituents who go to Iran, whether they are Canadian citizens or whether they're residents of Canada. As we know, traveling to Iran can be a very tricky business at the best of times, but it also can have very negative and very serious consequences. I have a constituent, Saeed Malapur, who went to Iran to visit a dying father. He was there for 3 days and was arrested and has spent the last 2 years in Evin prison. The reason he was arrested is because he was a website designer, and he, unfortunately, without his knowledge, his website was commandeered by others and his name was attached to it for an adult website. The Iranian authorities took notice of this and arrested him, and he's now spent 2 years in prison. The difficulty for me as a Member of Parliament is that his wife, who resides in Richmond Hill, is a Canadian resident, but not a Canadian citizen. I have written the Minister of Foreign Affairs to seek intervention with the Iranian Foreign Minister with regard to the situation. I've also written the Iranian Embassy in Ottawa to seek a meeting with them with regard to my constituent. But again, the difficulty is, even if you were to travel to Iran on a Canadian passport, the Iranian authorities do not recognize the Canadian passport and therefore would treat you as an Iranian citizen. The difficulty that I have is that the Canadian government cannot really intervene at all. In this case, there's no consular assistance with regard to Mr. Malapur because of the fact that he is not a Canadian citizen, only a Canadian resident. We are wanting to show, though, and put emphasis on the fact not only is it very dangerous to travel to Iran, but not to accept the fact that if Iranian authorities say all is forgiven, you can come, there's no difficulty. Unfortunately, this incident is not an isolated case. And so as a Member of Parliament, I try to do my best in terms of intervening both with Iranian authorities and with our own government. But again, it's better to err on the side of caution and really look at the situation before you go back. It is unfortunate in this case and his father passed away a few months after he was imprisoned. But again, the only rights that you have as a Canadian citizen in Iran would be if you were in trouble, in difficulty, we would try and then provide consular assistance from the Canadian Embassy in Tehran. But if you're not a Canadian citizen and you're a resident, you go back to Iran, there's very little that we can do. And this highlights, I think, a very difficult situation. As we know, the Iranian authorities are continuing repression in Iran. And again, I and other colleagues have continued to speak out about those situations. But when you have a government which really is immune to international public opinion, whether it's on the nuclear issue, whether it's on human rights, it makes it very difficult, obviously, to do very much other than, again, the need to continue to look at the issue of freezing Iranian assets abroad. That is one way, particularly with leadership and with particular business people, that you will get their attention. At home, one of the issues that we have been dealing with is the issue of white-collar crime. And that is something which we really haven't spent enough time on in the past. It's about dealing with people who fraudulently take money from individuals, either from companies or from private individuals. And again, what the legislation before the House of Commons is to bring in tough penalties, both in terms of fines and in jail time. There are hundreds of millions of dollars that are lost every year due to white-collar crime. We think of people who go in and rob a bank. We say that is pretty obvious. But in a white-collar crime issue, it's often the transferring of funds from one computer system to another, from one bank to another. And again, bringing in tough legislation on that is important, and we in the official opposition support that type of initiative. The last few weeks we've also been debating, and I've spoken both on the Canada-Jordan Free Trade Agreement and on the Canada-Panama Free Trade Agreement. But what we need to be doing is looking at larger agreements, particularly in the Middle East. The Gulf area has a free trade zone where we should be really looking at that. In the Asia Pacific, looking at free trade with countries like China, Japan, and others. The Americans are certainly not sitting by, and they have been very active in developing free trade agreements. The Japanese have developed free trade agreements with countries like Mexico, which of course is a NAFTA partner, and with the Philippines. So again, although we welcome some of these agreements or initiatives, it is important, very important, that we move forward, particularly in that area. Canada is also looking at developing a tax agreement with Turkey. I think that that is important because, again, we need to, Turkey is our 7th largest trading partner in Europe, and again, we need to diversify our trading relationships in order to help Canadian jobs at home and obviously our exports. So again, it's been a busy time, but again, I want to thank you for watching, and again, if you have any concerns, you can certainly contact my office. My name again is Brian Wilford, Member of Parliament for Richmond Hill. Thank you for watching.